The train sequence was probably the most daunting because it was the most fleshed out in the script, and it was easy to see and to be able to read between the lines early on that there was going to be a lot of CGI work involved.
I think we worked on the train sequence certainly from day one, till the very, very end of the film. So across that whole 2 years, we worked on the train sequence.
It became clear early on in the design of the train sequence we were going to need a lot more than just plates from New York with trains added. We decided the quantity of work dictated that we should probably shoot some real trains somewhere. Research brought us to the Loop in Chicago, which has contemporary high-rise buildings, which has an elevated train, and it's not altogether that different than the kinds of cars that would have or could have run on tracks for an elevated train in Manhattan.
We got on board really early just trying to plan the logistics of that and trying to determine how one might take Chicago footage, blend it with New York footage, blend it with CGI, buildings and atmosphere and street elements and that sort of thing to put together a scene that played as if it was shot in New York.
We put 16 cameras on a railroad car, and that was our train. We drove it around the Loop. There were other trains on the Loop. We had our own conductor and everything, and we drove this elevated train, bristling cameras around and around and around. Those plates became backgrounds for running shots, where there's images outside the windows, images across the top of the car where the camera has limited motion. We did a spider cam shot using a real Chicago train, a real stretch of Chicago street, where the camera starts out close on the characters and pulls back to reveal the train pulling away. We shot vistas or arrays, meaning we do tiles. We'd shoot 180-degree field of view with action, people and cars and all of that, and then we could seam those things together and make camera moves after the fact.
Here's an example of a pan and tile Chicago plate. Here's the pan and tile all put together. And that consists of 3 different cameras, 3 different 65mm cameras that were shot off of the L in Chicago. Camera 1, camera 2, camera 3. Stitch that all together. Add in your CG elements. And there you go. This has CG train, CG Spidey, CG Doc Ock, live action background integrated with CG background. In the far distance is all CG background. In the foreground, it's a live action building element.
Sometimes it's a completely CG shot, but wherever you can, you use a real train, that was set on rockers and different things that the mechanical effects guys would put together to make the train shake like a real train.
There's lots of stuff in the train sequence where there's combinations of CGI characters with live action train. Some cases there's live action characters shot blue screen on top of CGI train with a live background or a CGI background. So it's like a giant mix and match.
Certainly when they're fighting on the side of the train, that was difficult in the sense of trying to have laws of physics of gravity apply to them. Even if their feet can stick, they're going to be affected by gravity. And this shot definitely involved a lot of trying to get the exact right feel of how gravity would affect that. The right strength and look in the tentacles and everything else it's a big job. It's a big job. It was one of the more difficult sequences.
At the start of the train sequence, we sent a team of people to Chicago to get a bunch of plates that were used as backgrounds for a lot of the sequence, but many shots didn't have those backgrounds. So what we had to do was make our own. For both the buildings and the train, we sent a team to go acquire the geometry through laser surveying and take dozens and dozens of photos of the actual real buildings and the real train to apply as texture maps. We used the Chicago footage as a reference for the lighting and look of our buildings, but all of this is virtual and created in the computer to allow us the ability to move the camera around wherever we wanted. So what we have here is a wireframe representation in the computer of what this corridor of buildings might be. And this is what that corridor of buildings looks like when we apply our lighting and textures to it. In this shot, we couldn't use the footage in Chicago, so we had to create something in the computer that matched it. And then once you know that all the geometry integrity is good, then the lighters would actually really place lights in the scene and bring the whole scene together. We paid a lot of attention to reflections in the windows of the characters and the environment, and reflections in Spider-Man's eyepiece. When we're working, we plan to do CG versions of the environments and CG versions of the characters, so some of it we know ahead of time while we're shooting that there's no way to get it, and we'll have to do it virtually later. But sometimes it'll just come up later, and because we're prepared to do it, we just work with surrounding real shots and marry our virtual footage and sandwich it in between the real shots. Typically, the type of shots we're doing, just because of the camera move or different factors, needs to be completely computer generated. Even our virtual actors, though, are created very, very much from the real actors in terms of all the nuances. We definitely still really need the actors, it's just we can get away with using them in a different form later.